come up in all my classes, so I'm gonna tell you this right now. If you can't make it to class the day of the test, okay, don't help. Okay? Don't take it at home or wherever. I know it's a thing. But last year when I got evaluated or something like that, there was something came up where I had to have my in-person classes, making sure that they were coming in and getting so many hours of time or something like that. I don't know how that works through the state or something like that, if they, because they have these, you know, you guys know, they have the online, they have the hybrid, they got this thing or whatever. And so they require the teachers and students to have so much face-to-face time. Okay? If you can't make it, let me know, we'll figure something out, like I said. But please do not take it upon yourself. I'll just, you know, can't help it. All right? Just get a hold of me, we'll figure it out or whatever. So like I said, I've had that happen with my other classes too or whatever, so, please, like I said, don't do that, because like I said, we gotta make sure that, and you always have it set up that way. You guys remember, back in 2020, March, when we had the whole shutdown and stuff like that? Well, I had 3 in-person classes, and they were all, I was doing paper and pencil classes. And I had to take all 3 of those classes and switch them over on, because they, you know, you weren't allowed to come onto the campus. And so, I had it set up similar, maybe I can make changes in it now, but I always was like paranoid that, okay, what if we had another round of COVID or something, they shut us down? I just wanted to make sure that, you know, my students would not get burned or whatever, and everything would be good to go, and it would be so easy just to flip it over to, you know, 100% on. So that's why I have it like set up that way, right? I know hypothetically, you guys could probably turn this into an online course, but it is, you signed up for a face-to-face, okay? I have another class that's 100% online, so I mean, they don't have to come to class for it, but they signed up for it, so please, like I said, keep that in mind moving forward. We have a couple more exams here, and like I said, I just don't wanna get dinged again for not, lady came in, I forgot we had like that, I think it was a total of 12 students class, and like 3 or 4 showed up. And then on a written balance, like, you know, blah, 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 professors all needs to get to make sure students are coming to class, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it wasn't like bad or nothing like that, but, you know, the dean sees it, they send it up to the, who's ever involved with, office of student affairs and stuff, I just, like I said. So please, yeah, you know, like I said, moving forward, you got a test in 2 weeks, and then you got your final the first Saturday in December. So make sure you're here, if not here, like I said, talk to me, we'll figure something out. All right, last week, we did have an exam. And after the exam, we started to get into chapter 11, which deals with personality. And we said that personality is a relatively unique and consistent way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. And we discussed a little bit about a common debate in psychology. Is personality something you're born with, or is it something that develops as a result of experience? There's probably like a little bit of both. And we broke it down to temperament seems to be the physical foundation of personality, and then how that person with that temperament interacts with everybody else seems to, you know, form how their personality develops. And then we started talking about theories of personality. And we said that's any set of assumptions, ideas, or principles used to explain personality. And we started with the psychoanalytic theory. And that was the one proposed by Sigmund Freud. And Freud was talking about personality as being what he called the psyche, and how it's divided up into 3 parts. You have your id, you have your ego, and your superego. And we said that the first part to develop was the id. And we said the id was made up of instinctual drives. Okay? And that the id was governed by the pleasure principle. It wants instantaneous pleasure. And so you have eros and you have thanatos. Thanatos is the death instinct. Okay? If somebody doesn't like something, destroy it. Okay? Eros has to do more with like sex, reproduction, self-preservation.
Thank you.
And we said flowing out of eros was a type of energy that was going to fuel the psyche, the personality, the sexual energy. What would we call that energy?
Libido?
Libido. Then around age 2, the second part of personality develops, the ego. And where the id is governed by the pleasure principle, the ego is governed by what principle?
Reality?
Reality. Okay. So if the id has these impulses that are sexual or destructive in nature, okay, well, the ego has to come up with socially acceptable ways of dealing with those impulses. Okay. The third part of personality development is the superego, around age 6 or 7. And this is your conscience. This is where your morals are, your values. Okay? And when you live up to them, you have a sense of pride called the ego ideal. When you fall short, the superego punishes you with feelings of guilt. Now, we said also that these 3 parts of the psyche or personality exist in 3 different levels of awareness. Okay? There's the unconscious level, and that's, you know, the thoughts, feelings, behaviors you're unaware of. Okay? Then we talked about the conscious level, and that's all the thoughts, feelings, behaviors you're, you know, aware of at any given time. You know, how, you know, what you're thinking about right now, how you're feeling, and everything like that. What's the third level, where you're unaware of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and they could easily be brought to awareness?
Preconscious.
Preconscious, good. We said that the id exists mainly in the unconscious, and the other 2 are primarily in conscious and preconscious. However, they both, or all 3 of them, could kind of go back and forth. It's just that they, you know, spend the majority of time in those, you know, the given levels of awareness. And we talked about, like with the id, because it's in the unconscious, you necessarily can't just go into your unconscious to see what the id's up to. Stuff will come up in dreams, like the latent content of dreams, like the hidden meaning of stuff that happens in dreams. And then we talk about Freudian slips, where people say stuff they meant, but they didn't mean to say. It kind of slips out. And I think that's about what we left off.
Mm-hmm.
Good. For attendance, Maria, Inez, are you here?
Yeah.
Lisa,
Here.
Angelina,
Here.
and Nicola,
Here.
Isaiah? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I heard one came in before. Oksana,
Here.
and Kat,
Here.
Fatima,
Here.
and Roxana,
Here.
Evan,
Here.
Ariane,
Here.
and Monica's here. Monica's here. Kevin?
Here.
Jacqueline. And then Juliana. Oh, they skipped one. Okay. According to Freud, the psyche or personality, there's going to be 2 underlying processes that are going to contribute to the development of your personality or psyche. One of the processes is just regular old physical development. As you go from birth through childhood, adolescence, into young adulthood, your body is going to, physically mature, and including your nervous system, your brain. So Freud says underlying the development of your personality or psyche is just gonna be regular old physical development, okay? Development of your nervous system, central nervous system and so forth. Okay, makes sense. You know, like as a baby, your personality is gonna be different than it is when you're 13. And it's due to, you know, just physical maturity, physical maturation. Now, the second process that, boy, did somebody just come in?
No.
No. Thought maybe it was, SpongeBob. He got those boots that,
It's
you know,
fine.
they were what he called, but he could even like talk with those boots. Remember you, I was watching it, I let my kids watch it with me too. Not that my kids were watching it, but, you know, he could do that thing with the boots or whatever, where it's like, you know, kind of thing. But, so the second process, kind of underlying the development of personality, is something called socialization. Socialization. We know socializing refers to, you know, having, you know, hanging out with people, having fun, and so forth. Friendly interaction and so forth. All right. Socialization is something different. Does everybody know what socialization refers to? You maybe, and in another class where you can find that.
Being able to be with others without being a disturbance.
Good, good. Let's do it off an example. I want somebody to give me one word, okay, to describe the way everybody is dressed in this class. You would say everyone is dressed how?
Comfy, casual.
Casual or comfy, correct? Is there somebody here wearing a tuxedo or a gown or something like that? Maybe. All right. How did you know to dress this way when you're going to college?
We look at other people.
So it's other people, interacting with other people. Okay, that's socialization. Okay, socialization is when you learn. Okay, norms, social norms. That refers to sort of like unwritten, like rules or necessary for. You know, that are expected in a society. Okay? Norms or roles, those are just, you know, how people are expected to behave in society. So you know how to dress when you're going to college through interacting with other people. Or maybe you saw, you know, students 10 years ago, could have been in, you know, whatever, 5th grade. So you saw people going to college and you saw how they were dressed. If you watch some kind of movie from like the 1950s, you know, it's usually probably 99.9% of the students were males. And they were dressed up. They were wearing like, you know, sport jackets and stuff like that. If there was a woman attending college, you know, wore a dress. You tended to be dressed up. But over time, okay, these things, you know, change. And so you learn. You learn by, you know, interacting. You learn these norms. You learn how to behave. Right? If you really want to learn a language, go move to that country for a month. Because when you get hungry and you have to figure out how to, you know, ask for food or use the bathroom and stuff like that, you'll learn really quick. Okay? could get those Rosetta Stones and stuff like that, but, go to Japan for a month or two, and, you'll start really picking up on the language and so on. And it's from interacting with other people in that culture or society, you begin to pick up what the basic rules are. And that's socialization, so Freud said that's another big part of the development of your personality or psyche, by interacting with other people. Remember what I said before, the ego is governed by the reality principle. It has to come up with socially acceptable ways to deal with these impulses, these raw, instinctual impulses from the id. And the only way you can do that is by interacting with other people and figuring out what the heck is socially acceptable. Okay? So that's why, you gotta wait till you're like 2, right? When you're able to talk and interact. Okay? Now, sometimes that id pops up in little terrible 2s or whatever, but, for the most part, that's when the process starts. All right. So keep in mind those 2 things. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is the personality or psyche is going to develop in stages. And Freud calls these stages psychosexual stages. There's going to be 5 of them, going all the way up to young adulthood. So starting from birth, going all the way up to young adulthood. Now, what's going to happen in each of these psychosexual stages, there's going to be a part of your body, a part of your anatomy, that's going to be kind of an area of focus. You are going to try to provide stimulation and pleasure to that body part. Okay, so in each stage, one of these body parts, or parts of your anatomy, is going to be featured. And according to Freud, you have to provide pleasure or stimulation to this body part. He never said how much, but he just said that during this stage you had to, provide just the right amount. Okay. Now he calls these body parts, or these parts of your anatomy, he calls them erogenous zones. Erogenous zones. EROGENOUS. Erogenous zones. Okay. That's the body parts that are featured in each of these psychosexual stages. Like I said, he never said how much stimulation or pleasure was enough. But the one thing he did say is that if you provided too much or too little stimulation during that stage, some of the libido or libidinal energy, some of that libido would get stuck on that body part. Called it fixation, when the libido gets stuck on one of those erogenous zones. So if you provide too much, too little, some of your libido is going to get stuck or fixated on that erogenous zone. And then this is going to show up in some of your adult behaviors, part of your adult personality.
Interesting.
So the first stage is going to be from birth to 18 months. And this is referred to as the oral stage, birth to 18 months, the oral stage. So by that name, the oral stage, which body part do you think is the erogenous zone in this stage?
Mouth.
The mouth. Okay. So Freud is saying that babies derive a lot of pleasure, stimulation, through feeding and sticking stuff in their mouth. Okay, their thumb, sometimes even their foot, you know, a binky or a pacifier, stuff they shouldn't. But he says that, you know, during this oral stage, babies derive pleasure by, you know, through feeding and you know, sucking and stuff. And so, for example, Freud says, if let's say maybe a baby is being breastfed or bottle fed, and they're left on the breast or bottle too long, okay, maybe past the end of this oral stage or beyond, then some of the libido is going to get stuck on that baby's mouth. And when they grow up as an adult, Freud would describe them as being orally fixated. Orally fixated, some of that's libido. And how do you know somebody who's orally fixated? Freud would say these are people who, as adults, you know, like to eat, drink, smoke, talk, kiss, chew gum, anything that you would find pleasurable with your mouth. Now Freud would know. He's probably the poster child for oral fixation. When he would get up in the morning, he would light up a cigar, and he would chain smoke cigars until he went to bed at night, even while he was being treated for jaw cancer. Okay? So that's somebody who would be a poster child for, you know, being orally fixated. Okay? The second stage, second psychosexual stage, is 18 months to 3 years, and this is called the anal stage. The anal stage. During this stage, 18 months to 3 years, this is when, you know, most children are being potty trained or toilet trained. Children derive pleasure from learning to control their bladder and their bowels. The problem is where the fixation comes in, or some libido in this case, happens if the child's being toilet trained or potty trained, right? And let's say the parents are very punitive, right? They're always getting like punished or yelled at, you know, for having an accident, this, that, or the other thing. You know, Freud says what can happen is the children during this stage, because the moms and the, you know, or dads, whoever's being too harsh on them about this toilet training stuff, they can like protest in one of two ways. Right? One way is the child is one who kind of holds their urine or their feces in. Remember, they're learning to control their bowels or bladder. So some of the children learn to hold it in, to get back at the parents sooner. So for example, let's say there's some kind of big event, let's say it's a wedding today, and you got this child and they're, 2.5, going on 3 or whatever, and they're sitting on the potty chair, and the parents want them to go before they, put on a clean pool off or what have you, to get dressed and go. And they're just sitting there, nothing's coming out. And the parents are, all right, let's get going. And as soon as they pull that pull-up up in their pants, okay? So it's like kind of their way of giving the middle finger to their parents about them being all over them for this toiletry and stuff. Now, Freud says, as a result from this socialization or interaction, these children are going to grow up to become what he calls anal retentive. Anal retentive. And Freud said this is where things like OCD comes from, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. These are people as adults, they're either like super clean, like everything has to be in like perfect order. Okay. For example, if I say, can you grab my cane off this counter here, and you go over and you move the cup, and you give me that, and when I come back, all right, I have to put the cup exactly where it was. Okay. So these are people that everything has to be in order. They're neat freaks. They clean all the time. They have to have everything like super organized. They also kind of be collectors. Okay. And when I talk about collectors, like not just like hoarders where they got like piles of crap, but they they got like every Beanie Baby that was ever made or something like that, or they have like this extensive Pokemon card collection, and they'll display them and stuff like that. When I was younger, in my 20s, so you're going back maybe 40 years ago or something like that. I remember I had a friend of mine, and his brother had this like mobile DJ business. Now, I mean, you guys have DJs now, but they just bring up a laptop or whatever. They got all the music on there. Okay. Back in the day, you had to bring everything with you. Okay. And so you would always talk to if it's a wedding, whoever's getting married, and find out what music they want, this and that, and then you would have to go track it down, and then you would bring your generic songs that they play at every wedding or something like that. So anyway, I remember I was over this guy's house. My friend went over there to, I forgot what, get his shirt or something like that he had to pick up. And this guy in his living room, on one wall, the entire thing from like the floor to the ceiling was full of record albums. Okay. Beautifully, put in there, I can't remember how he had it, but maybe crates, but like looked like bookshelves. And I remember I'm just standing there, and I just kind of went over and I pulled one, out just to, whatever, look at it, and I put it back in. He immediately comes over and straightens it out exactly the way it was. Okay? That's anal retentive. He has a big collection. It's all has to be super organized, neat, that kind of thing. All right. Now the other personality, you got the holders. Okay? The other way children can sort of protest against their parents if the parents are being punitive is they can let it all loose. And so these are the children that aren't the holders, but they're the ones who get into the bathtub and have a crap explosion. And as a parent, it's like they're sitting there playing away with the toy in the bathtub, but you're smelling this poop smell, and you look, and it looks like a swarm of piranhas around, but it's all poop, and they could care less. Okay? Or they quietly, they're sitting on the potty chair going, and they're taking their poop and smearing it all over the wall and stuff like that. Okay? Freud says that these children are going to grow up to be what he calls anal expulsive. Anal expulsive. EXPULSIVE. How do you know if you're anal expulsive? When you leave here today, and you look in your car, or you go home and look in your room, or look in your apartment, your house, and it looks like a hurricane hit it, all right, that's somebody who's anal expulsive. They tend to be very messy, okay, or part of their house is messy. See, I gotta look. I wonder how, I don't know if you ever wrote on it or not, but, like a hoarder, talking to these people, they're like, kind of like both. They got like this collection, but it's a disaster. Okay? They, keep all this stuff. And I always feel bad because as a person, it's like, I'm not a hoarder, but I seem to hang on to everything. And it's like I got this thought in my head, well, one day I might need this. I mean, somebody may need this pink and green twisty, so I better put it in this kitchen drawer there just in case. And every 10 years, maybe a piece of garbage I save, somebody needs. And I feel like I rescued them. I came to the rescue. Oh, here's that, twisty word. And it's like, and the other thing I feel bad, I feel guilty. It's like, I throw this away, it's gonna go into the dump. And it's not gonna rot for 700 years, and here I am just contributing to the landfill, I'll just hang on to it in case somebody needs it or something like that. It's like, I just can't get over that sometimes. And the other thing too is, I don't know if you guys ever had this, you ever clean everything up, you finally get through it, you decide to go through it, you sort everything out, you clean it, get rid of it. Always, the frickin' next day, something I needed, I threw out, or I gave to Goodwill. It's like, shit, I just need it, why did I do that, kind of thing. Or, like a terrible sorter. All right, here's this pile, I'm gonna give this to the Goodwill. This one I'm not sure about. This pair of pants, I'm gonna see if my brother wants some. This, then I end up with, like, instead of one pile of crap, I got them all broken down and sorted out into, like, 8 piles. And I spent the entire, Labor Day doing this. And it's like, shall never get those 6 hours back, and like I said, I just, it's not my, some people that come in and boom, boom, they get organized and they're done, and it just, makes sense. With me, it's like, I don't know, I'm like a geologist, I have everything. If I go looking for something, okay, do you have that letter that, you got from whatever? And it's like, yeah, hang on. I don't look at the top. I know I got that letter in August, so I'm gonna go about 3 inches down this stack to find that thing, because I know where it's at. Okay, I keep it in order in terms of chronological order. Okay? It's like a geologist. Right? If you're looking for something 10 million years old, you're not gonna dig in the sewer. You gotta go down into the thing, a good 1.5 miles to find it. So, like I said, that's my shortcoming or just my personality. Must have a bad toilet drink or something. Now, the third stage is referred to as the phallic stage. The phallic stage. PHALLIC. The word phallic, or sometimes you hear the word phallic symbol, okay? And what that means is it represents some type of, part of like the sexual anatomy, like the genitals or breasts or something like that. See it in artwork sometimes and things like that. It's supposed to, represent, I don't know, penis or something. Okay, but the word phallic refers to sort of symbolizing or in reference to genitals. And this is the phallic stage, and it lasts from ages, we'll say 3 to 6. 3 to 6, 3 to 7, something along those lines. And during this stage, children become very interested in genitals, their own and other children's. So I mean, it's not unusual to see a kid in this age range, 3 to 6, you know, not like fondling themselves like in a masturbating way or something, but it's like, hey, I wonder what, you know, almost like exploring, themselves or whatever, just kind of checking it out. It's not necessarily anything that they're doing X-rated or nothing like that, just like a normal kid, just being curious. They also become curious about, other kids' genitals, especially those of the opposite sex. So you might hear a boy, maybe a 4 or 5-year-old boy, he sees his mom changing his baby sister. And he might say, hey mom, where's Sissy's pee-pee? Or something like that, okay? Or he's changing his clothes and there's another little boy the same age, and he'll say, look, Joey has a pee-pee too, or something like that. Okay, so they're like paying attention to this stuff. So that's going on there in this phallic stage. Now, what also is going on here in this phallic stage? Let me start with the boys. Okay, according to Freud, so don't yell at me or whatever, just don't kill the messenger. According to Freud, what happens here in this phallic stage, little boys tend to fall in love with their mothers. This is occurring at an unconscious level. Right? If the kid's not sitting there, oh man, mom's really hot. It's not like that. They're thinking more of there's like this unconscious attraction to the mother. And you'll hear like little boys sometimes say stuff like, when I grow up I want to marry mom, or mommy's my girlfriend, or something like that. Okay? If there's a father, there's going to be sort of a resentment toward the father. They want the father to get lost. Okay? So you might see like mom and dad are laying in bed, let's say on a Saturday, Sunday morning, and a little boy may come up, and he crawls between them, and he takes his feet. He's trying to shove dad out of the bed. Okay? So there's this resentment. But there's also kind of a fear or an anxiety. The little boy knows, that dad's a lot bigger and stronger than him. So Freud says that he sort of resents the father, but he also fears the father. What he's afraid of, again, this is at an unconscious level, he's afraid that the father's going to cut off his genitals. And Freud refers to this as castration anxiety. So there's this attraction to mother, resentment toward father, but there's also this fear or anxiety when it comes to the father. What begins to happen toward the end, by the way, this is called the Oedipal complex. Oedipal complex. Oedipal is a Greek word, it's Oedipal. The Oedipal complex. All right, and this is based on a Greek story called Oedipus Rex. Okay? Oedipus Rex was somebody who married his mother and killed his father. All right, he didn't know, What happened was, when he was a baby, I don't remember the circumstances, I don't know, he was left out for the, you know, in the wild or whatever, he's left to die or whatever. But he lived, somebody found him. And he grew up, and he became a ruler of a nation. And he went to battle against another nation. And his father, he didn't know it was his father, was the ruler of that nation. And his mother was the queen. And so he killed the father, and then married the queen, which was actually his biological mother. So Freud refers to this as the Oedipal complex. Now, as we get toward the end of this phallic stage, around ages 6 or 7, okay, what happens is the boy, you know, realizes he's not going to have mom or nothing like that, so he starts identifying with the father. He identifies with the father. It's almost like, ah, if you can't beat him, join him. Okay, so he starts to bond with the father. And what happens here is the boy starts to like imitate the father. So let's say the father's a firefighter. When the father comes home and he leaves his boots and his hat. Oh, the little kid may put on the boots and hat and walk around the house. Or let's say dad's some kind of big, you know, sports fan, you know, Buckeye fan or something like that. So every Saturday the father watches the football game, and you know, the kid puts on his Buckeye shirt and sits next to him. Or if the dad says, you know, all the time, well, it is what it is. The kid starts saying that or whatever. So he starts, like I said, identifying with the father, like bonding with him, and he starts to imitate the father. Now this is crucial because according to Freud, he's also going to start picking up on the father's values and morals. Okay? And this is where the superego develops. Okay, so he's got it. The boy has to identify with the father, so he can start picking up on the father's values and morals. According to Freud, if there's no father around, or no father figure, or no, you know, nobody like that to bond with, he says the boy's going to develop a weak superego. It's a weak superego. Where there's, you know, he's not going to do guilt. Before he says that a lot of these, you know, boys will, you know, grow up to be juvenile delinquents, get in trouble all the time. The other thing that happens, according to Freud, if this boy doesn't resolve this issue with the mother, okay, if it doesn't get resolved, when this boy becomes an adult, okay, let's say he's 21 now, what kind of women is he going to be attracted to?
His mama.
Older women, okay, larger women, okay, because even if mom, you know, as a kid was 100 pounds or whatever, still it's way bigger than him. So older, larger women, right? So this, you know, he's going to be like 20, you know, wanting to date 40-some-year-olds. Okay. All right, now, for the girls during this phallic stage, right, they have something called the Electra complex. Again, it's another Greek story. I believe Electra killed her children, kind of the spider husband or something. I can't remember how that one went down. But
Can you spell that for me, please?
Pardon me?
You said what?
Or the Electra?
Electra?
Electra complex, yeah. Electra. Electra complex. All right. So what happens here is the girl during this phallic stage, ages 3 to 6, she's going to resent the mother. I'll tell you why in a second. She's going to be attracted to the father. And what she's attracted to with the father is his penis. Okay? She's attracted to his penis. And she desires a penis of her own. Okay? And as a penis, she wants a penis. And Freud calls this, it's probably a term you've heard before, penis what?
Envy?
Penis envy. Penis envy. That's where that came from. Why she resents mom? Because she thinks that mom also at one time had a penis and did something to get the father angry, and dad cut it off. Okay. Again, this is that sort of like an unconscious level. All right. Again, as the phallic stage progresses, the girl realizes she's not gonna have a penis, and then she, slowly identifies with the mother. Doing the same thing, imitating mom, picking up mom's morals, values, that kind of stuff. Now Freud says that a woman's then desire to have children, all right? The motivation to have children. The children, and I never looked that deep into it, but somehow the child, by having the child, maybe because it comes out from between her legs or something like that, the child is like a substitute for a penis that she never had. Freud's an interesting character when he comes up with all this stuff. And it's weird, if you ever go on and you take a class in personality or something where you're reading Sigmund Freud, you're reading actually his books. It's kind of like, I remember reading some of the stuff when I was in graduate school. You read something, it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's a nutcase. Then you read the next page of what he's, there, and you get this like cold chill. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy's like psychic. He's like describing me or my sister, or my father, mother to a T. They almost like given a profile of them or something like that. So it's kind of interesting because it's like on one hand it's like what a idiot. On the other hand, you just sit there with your mouth open, disbelief because it's like he's so accurate. All right, so that's the phallic stage. The fourth stage, sometimes called a period, is probably, we'll say, ages 7 to 12. Ages 7 to 12. And this is the latency stage or latency period. To 12, 7 to 12, basically from the end of the phallic stage to the beginning of puberty. I'm just throwing out arbitrary age of 12, give or take a year or two. All right, during this stage, not a lot's happening. Remember I told you the word latent means hidden? What happens is all those like Oedipal things and fixations and all that stuff, it gets kind of like put on the back burner. And usually during this time is when a child goes off to school, more socialization, and they start to basically learn to read, write, learn the skills they're going to need to survive in their culture, their society. So during this time, there's like this almost like a moratorium, this time out from all this psychosexual stage stuff. Then once puberty hits, we'll say around age 12, we get into the fifth and final stage. This is called the genital stage. And it usually begins around the same time a young person is going through puberty. So imagine like somebody like, we'll say 6th, 7th, 8th graders, something like junior high, late middle school. What usually happens first in this genital stage is that children will form like strong same-sex relationships. You think about it, if you guys ever had any kids or something like that, or if you remember yourselves, you know, you go to a school and you look at like the 6th graders at lunchtime or something like that, it's usually like all the females are sitting with the males, boys with the boys, you know, that kind of thing. And as they get older, there tends to be some more like inter mingling and stuff like that. And the reason for this, Freud says, is because as you're going through puberty, you know, let's say young females developing breasts, maybe the guys developing pubic hair and stuff like that. And all this is going on, you kind of want this like close friend to sort of bounce off, like, hey, you know, what's going on here? You know, girl starts menarche or menstrual cycles and stuff. They're basically just using each other as soundboards or just trying to make sense out of what's going on. The body's going through all these, you know, physical changes, or suddenly adolescent females go through the growth spurt earlier, suddenly they shoot up and they're like the tallest one in the class and stuff like that, and all this stuff is going on. So they're usually kind of bonding with people who are, you know, rocking in the same boat with them. Then Freud, you know, says as it progresses, like I said, you get more like mingling of groups, like, you know, males and females. I remember, like my children were in grade school, they would have these basketball tournaments. And the younger, you know, when you had to come, you know, you get there early, you had to wait for your turn or whatever. I remember like the, you know, 5th, 6th graders and stuff, you know, you had like more of the males sitting with the males, females with the females. But in the 7th, 8th grade, as they were like waiting their turn, there was like more of a kind of a mix sitting on the bleachers. Okay? What happens next, according to Freud, is, you know, there's dating. And then what finally happens, this is at the end of the genital stage, the end of your genital stage, and this is important. Finally happens, you get through all this stuff, and you finally develop a healthy psychosocial personality. And sense of sexuality. Develop a healthy sense of, or healthy psychosocial personality and sense of sexuality. When you're able to direct your sexual urges, so that look, you know, your sexual urges toward an appropriate substitute. You're able to direct your sexual urges toward an appropriate substitute for the opposite sex parent. Freud said at that point in time, the personality is fully developed. You have this healthy psychosocial personality and sense of sexuality, and you're able to direct your sexual urges toward an appropriate substitute for the opposite sex parent. All right, so a 20-year-old, you know, wanting to marry a 50-year-old woman or something like that, that according to Freud, that probably wouldn't be a good substitute for the opposite sex parent. It's like I think like your traditional marriage, heterosexual marriage and stuff like that. That's what Freud's talking about. Never said that, but you know, it sounds like that's the direction it's going. All right, so I took you through this. I walked you through it, gave you the kind of like a quick version of all these. I mean, he writes books on each of these stages and stuff. I just gave you the quick overview. Now, you look at this stuff and it's like, man, this is, you know, kind of weird stuff, or, you know, maybe you look at it and, you know, it explains everything, you know, however it goes for you. But, bottom line, probably like the three main contributions that Freud made here. Again, I think I told you guys, like his subjects, you know, you gotta remember, this was like the late 1800s, and he had a handful of patients. They were all upper middle class women in Austria. And this was during a time, the way they call it the Victorian period. Very, very conservative. Nobody talked about sex. You weren't allowed. If you went on a date, you had to have a chaperone. And I told you, Freud wanted to get married and you had to get the father's permission. Okay? So it was like this, people, you know, repressed, you know, a lot of what was going on sexually. And so when he was, you know, then talking to these patients and all this stuff came out, he thought that, you know, oh, this must be, you know, how it is for, you know, universally and throughout all the time or whatever. Today, if Freud was alive and formulating the theory, it might be way different. But I want you to keep that in mind. That's the context, the historical context. Okay, a lot of hang-ups and stuff, people uptight about sex stuff and really didn't talk about it. And, you know, so that's how it came out. But his three main contributions is he is probably one of the first psychologists that proposed the idea of development occurring in stages. Not all, you know, psychologists. Well, you know, some of the people after, like Erik Erikson, he was the guy, I don't know if you ever saw his stuff before. We talked about him a little bit, check around. He's that guy who he has like the 8 stages that go from birth to death, where you have like the trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, you know, and so on throughout the whole lifespan. That's one of Freud's understudies. Most of all the people who studied under him, including his daughter Anna, dumped the whole sexual thing and went in a different direction. But he was one who, you know, came up with this concept of, you know, development occurring in stages. The second thing that he pointed out that was important was that events in our childhood do shape our adult personality. Maybe not the way he described it. But they do a lot of research. There's a professor at Kent State, I think he might have retired by now. His first name was George, I think it was the last name. But he used to do research on tying together a person's earliest memory earliest memory, maybe sometimes their most vivid memory, with whatever their vocational or occupational choice was. Okay, so you talk to people, it's like, what feeling, oh, I want to become a vet or vet tech or whatever. It's like, what was your earliest memory? Oh, I remember I was like 2 years old and we brought home a little kitty. What field are you going into? I'm going into nursing. Oh, you're going into nursing. What's your earliest memory? I remember falling down and having to go to the emergency room. Okay. But he kind of links those things together. So those events, those early events, shape, a lot of our occupational choices. I remember, kind of did something similar in one of my classes, teaching developmental psych, and I stopped after this, or I made sure I put a disclaimer in there. But I remember we were talking about infantile amnesia. I mean, most people, even you guys in the class who have a good memory, I don't think you remember, being born or anything, do you? Anybody remember that? The big day, huh? No, you don't, because you have what's called infantile amnesia. And so I, went around the room and I was asking people, their earliest memory, thinking back, a lot of it had to do with holiday stuff like Christmas or going on a vacation, and it, ranged from like 1 to 3 and stuff like that. And we talked a little bit how it ties in a little bit with their, maybe their major occupation they want to get into and stuff like that. So I'd go around the room and ask people. And then I remember we went around the room. This was a classroom like this. It wasn't a group therapy session. And I remember I got this one lady and it's like, oh, okay, what's your earliest memory? I remember when I was 1 year old, my father throwing my mother down the steps. Okay, well, it may be like your second earliest memory, okay? That is, I had a, preface in the future because it's, like I said, it's not group therapy, and I don't think you probably want to disclose that to a whole bunch of people that they really don't know you that well. Maybe you do, I don't know, but, that's, may impact it for going into social work or something, who knows, okay? But usually there's a relationship there, so that's important. Yeah, the third thing, okay, stages, development of stages, events in childhood shaping our adult personality. The third thing was the whole unconscious thing, that there's a lot going on in the unconscious that really influences our thoughts and behaviors and stuff. And it doesn't seem that revolutionary when I say that here. You guys don't have anything that makes sense. But you gotta remember, back then, in the early times of psychology, this is like the late 1800s, we just had Wundt with his structuralism, breaking down conscious experience into its basic parts. And then we had, the William James as a functionalist trying to figure out how, consciousness adapts and changes over time. So, it was revolutionary at the time when he said, no, you gotta focus on the unconscious. There's a lot going on that we're not aware of. Okay? So that's pretty much it. When it comes to psychoanalytic, I'm just gonna focus on Freud. Like I said, there are other people that study under him, as Dr. Anna Horney, Erik Erikson, Alfred Adler, Carl Jung. There's a guy now that's popular, a psychologist, his name is Jordan Peterson, really popular in the past 10 years on the internet and stuff. He's a Jungian psychologist, so one of the people studying with Freud was Carl Jung, and he is trained in that type of psychology. Like I said, they're all very interesting. Maybe a chance to take a look. Does anybody have any questions about that? Psychoanalytic? Freud. This is where that whole laying on the couch and just talking out loud came from. Have you ever seen that like in a movie or show or something like that type of therapy? Okay. Next I want to talk talked about some of these people before, like Watson, Skinner, Ventura in our last section. They see personality as just being a set of learned behavior patterns. All right, so if you're an overeater, it's not because you're left on the crust or bottle too long. According to the learning theorists, it's because you were reinforced with that type of behavior. Okay? Or, some type of, punishment from something else that led you to, overeat. And so the learning theorists, they say if there's a part of your personality you're not happy with, well, you could just either relearn a new pattern or go through extinction and get rid of the old one. The radical behaviorists like Watson and B.F. Skinner, Watson with the classical conditioning, Skinner with the Operant conditioning, they say that they can explain all of personality by just using the principles of classical and operant conditioning. In other words, they don't include genetics, they don't include motivation, they don't include anything else. All right? And Watson, he had this bold proclamation, you give me any baby, and using classical conditioning, I could turn that baby into a lawyer, a doctor, a beggar man, a thief, whatever you want them to be, I could turn them into it. Again, they're pretty not naive when it came to things like genetics. Like I said, motivation plays a huge role. Now, those were the radical behaviors. The new behaviors, people like Albert Bandura, they started to include that stuff into their theories of personality. Okay? They still saw personality as a set of learned behavior patterns. But think about like with Bandura, remember he says you have to pay attention, form a mental representation, have the ability to replicate, and be motivated. Okay? And the same thing would be applied to like your personality. Okay? There's certain things that, from genetics, we're better at paying attention to than others. Right? We all have different abilities. We all have different levels of motivation. That play a huge role. That's pretty much it. I mean, that was how they break down personality, just a bunch of learned behavior patterns. And you use the principles of conditioning and different aspects of learning to explain them and alter them. Now there were others that came along. There's Dollar and Miller. They tried to take like Freud's stages and put them into learning terms and stuff like that. But I'm not going to get into too much depth there. But I just want you to walk away with the understanding that the learning theorists see personality as a set of just a learned behavior. You either unlearn them or learn new ones, and pretty much go from there. I do want to tell you guys something here. This is just off the record, but I like to share good news or helpful news. I think I remember I told you guys I ended up like hurting my foot real bad a few weeks ago. I was in the bathroom and kind of lost my balance and slammed my left foot into the toilet and used that foot to sort of as leverage, and I think I ended up spraining my foot, so I wouldn't fall all the way back. Because remember, I was telling you guys, like with negative reinforcement, started walking around with the shoe on that day because I got rid of the pain, or didn't get rid of it, but you know, whatever. All right, it's always a domino effect, especially as you get older. So I had to, you know, my foot was bugging me, and I bent over to lift something or move something that's fairly heavy, and I ended up like pulling something in my lower back because my weight wasn't, wasn't equal distribution. I think it was probably bending over a little further on one side than the other, and ended up, pulling, straining my lumbar or something in the lower back. Now, not trying to get too much into like medical stuff, but I gotta tell you this. That thing bugged me for like a good 2 weeks. I mean, I was doing everything. I was taking Motrin, I was putting heat on it, I got one of those little like massage guns or whatever. And I mean, I was trying to get, it just would not go. Every morning I got this so depressing because my back would hurt as soon as I stood up. I'm like, oh, man. Just for your own future reference. I'm not saying this is gonna be a cure for everything, but I watched this guy on YouTube. I think he's a physical therapist. His name is Jeff Cavalier. You guys ever heard of him before? All right, Jeff Cavalier, he has a YouTube channel. I think it's called like Athlete Next or something like that. But the reason I'm telling you this is I was listening to him, and he was talking about, how to immediately get rid of your lower back pain. It's YouTube, I've seen these before, how to, lose 80 pounds in a half hour and all this there. I was skeptical, but I'm gonna well, maybe he's got something. I'll start these in a couple weeks, I'll be better. So I listened to it, I couldn't figure out what they were doing. They didn't give a good enough verbal. So I showed the video to my wife. I said, tell me what they're doing, like stretches or whatever. So I can do it. So that was like Tuesday night or something like that. And so I did them. They're kind of painful when I did them. Went to bed, got up the next day. A little better. Then I did them, before I took a shower before I had to go to work. I'm telling you guys, it was Wednesday. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I remember. It's like, I don't have any more back pain. It was gone. I could not believe it. So, my point is this, you end up like straining something or something happens, maybe check this guy out, because like I say, he's a physical therapist and stuff like that. And I'm talking like instant healing. I would, back pain, you go to the doctor and they give you injections and crap and you're gonna have to get this surgically done. I'm telling you, I mean, it was like, one of the exercises, right, is my left side, lean against the wall like this, support yourself, lift your knee up and touch it to the wall. That was it. That was one of them. The other one you had to lay on the floor. And I'm like, whatever. So I did. I'm telling you, it's like instant cure. And I'm just saying that because this year, shoveling snow and stuff, and doing different things here, sometimes you strain your back. I was like blown away. I could not believe within less than 24 hours it was gone. So I'm just sharing that with you guys. So
Thank you.
Make a note. I don't get any money from this guy. Kind of stumbled across it. Just thought, well, for what it's worth, let's give it a try. And it actually worked. I 2 weeks putting heat on there and taking Motrin. I haven't taken anything today. It feels normal. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we did the psychoanalytic. We did the learning theorist. Now we get to we did 2, so now we get to the third one. We get to the third force in psychology. The third force. And we're going to talk about the humanistic approach. They're called the third force because they basically were not happy with the other two movements. I think I told you guys. First half of the 20th century, psychology was dominated by psychoanalytic stuff, Freud stuff, or this learning stuff. Well, in the 50s, that's when Rogers and Maslow kind of showed up, and they had a different take on things. All right. They didn't like Freud and the psychoanalytic stuff. Their objection to them was they thought they were too deterministic. So in other words, that, you know, you had these events occur in childhood, and they're pretty much gonna, you know, shape you for the rest of your life. You know, you're a smoker now, and the only way you can quit is you need to go into therapy, you need to go back and resolve whatever that conflict was, or what have you, that ended up, you know, when you were 1.5 years old, that caused you to become orally fixated. And you say, no, you don't need all that. Okay? And they weren't happy with the learning theorists because they thought they were too mechanistic. In other words, they thought that they were treating people too much like machines. An event occurs in the environment, boom, this response automatically occurs. Okay, so they didn't like them. They thought they treated people too much like machines or too mechanistic. So their big push, the humanistic people, was that they believed that people had free will. That you could make choices, you could make changes on your own. And you could be the best person you can be without having to go through like years of therapy or you know, going through, you know, figure out, you know, learning, you know, relearning certain behavior patterns and stuff like that, you know, you were conditioned to think or feel this way. No, they're saying you could, you know, change like quick. Like I just was going over with you guys with this Jeff Cavalier guy in these couple of stretches. You know, I didn't have to go through the, you know, the long, you know, I'll forget it, you know, you're older, your discs all, you know, have lost all the, you know, padding, you're not gonna get sick. You know, I didn't do that. I did this guy's stretches, and the back pain was gone. And that's what they're saying here, is that you have free will. You could change today. You could change your thinking. You could change your habits. Like I said, this is where a lot of the self-help stuff came from. You know, stuff related to self-esteem and stuff. I'll show you that in a second. But all this, you know, self-help and all this other stuff came from here. It's like you don't want to smoke. Well, you could start it now. You can start, you know, take your medication, get you, you know, smoking cessation stuff. Here's some habits that you can learn without having to go through, you know, whole learning, you know, things or whatever. Here's, you know, different approaches. So, you know, start a diary, you know, write this stuff down. And they were saying that, you know, you could just work on changing stuff. You didn't have to make it all so elaborate. Going through extinctions or going through years of therapy. Right, let me see if I can get through. Let me talk a little bit about Maslow before we take a think break. What do you guys think about this? All right, Abraham Maslow. They talk about his theory in chapter 8. So it's not in this chapter, but I include it because I think you have to understand Maslow before you get a little bit into Rogers. Would you guys all agree with me that everyone in this classroom has some sort of need, be it emotional, physical, mental? Do we all have needs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maslow, he says that to understand a person or person's personality, you have to understand their level of needs. Okay, if you could understand the level of needs that they're at, you could understand their personality. So he has it set up like a pyramid or a hierarchy. And he says that at the very bottom, the basic needs of, all people have are physical needs. You gotta eat. You have to, drink stuff, what have you, have to sleep. The next one up from that is safety and security. The next one up from that is love and belonging. The one above that is self-esteem. And the one at the top, that the only things 10% of people get to is called self-actualization. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. So this makes sense. Okay, physical needs. If you're, let's say, homeless, lost your house in some kind of disaster or something like that, to understand where you're at, you're looking for physical needs. Or maybe like a younger person, they're not able to work and be able to sustain themselves. They're depending upon other people for take care of these physical needs. Okay. Once those are taken care of, the next one up on the list is safety and security. All right. And safety and security, what that refers to is that you have, a place to live, relatively safe place to live. And you have, some sort of income or food or something coming in to sustain yourself. Now, let's say you're like 18 years old and you're rooming with 2 other people, and you have a job at Amazon or something like that, and you got enough money to split the rent and pay for some food and stuff like that. Probably not enough to maybe live on your own, but you got a place to live and you're getting by here. That's safety and security. Love and belonging. This would be like having a family, basically having people in your life that you care about, that care about you. Okay, so in other words, people that matter to you care about you. That's love and belonging. Self-esteem. Self-esteem, we hear that term all the time. Oh, I have low self-esteem or high self-esteem. Basically what it means, self-esteem, is that you feel good about yourself because you're doing well in areas of your life that matter to you. Feel good about yourself because you're doing well in areas of your life that matter to you. Could be school, could be your career, could be your physical appearance,
Could be your relationships, whatever you value. Okay, you're doing well in those areas. Now, most people, once they get to that level, are pretty full there. Right? But then Maslow says at the very tippy top of this pyramid or hierarchy is self-actualization. All right? And he says that people at this level have what he calls meta needs. All right? And these are needs that go above and beyond just food and a place to live and a career. Okay, these are like more spiritual, more philosophical. You're more concerned here with personal growth. Okay, maybe some sort of mission, in life. You've succeeded, you've done well in your careers. Now you're going on to something else. Maybe starting a nonprofit or volunteering or studying something that you enjoy. You're majoring now in theology. It's like, when you're 20, though, what do you do with that? It's like now you're just trying to learn about philosophy and God and all these kind of deep things. Not because you're going to make any money off of it, but just for your own personal growth. Those are people who are self-actualizers. And he said you can tell these people because they also have what he calls peak experiences. Peak experiences. Where they pay attention to the simplest things that are just completely blown away by them. Let's say it's winter time and a snowflake lands on their sleeve and they just become suddenly in awe with the geometry of the snowflake. Or maybe walking past a flower and they stop to just marvel at the complexity of the way the petals are all put together or something. I mean, he calls those peak experiences. And roughly 10% of people he feels gets to that level. A good example of this, there was a show out on TV probably 30 years ago. If you had a chance, you can maybe watch a couple episodes. Some of you guys may have watched it or seen it before. There used to be a show, and it had the actor Tim Allen on it. It was called Home Improvement. And the basic premise of the show was he had one of these TV shows where they did, it's called Tool Time, where they did home improvement projects. And in the show, he would have, episode where they wanted to change something on his show or something was going on. He had kids, issue with the family, or one of his, co-workers or something like that. But he had this neighbor, and you never saw the neighbor's face. The neighbor's name was Wilson. And he would go in his backyard and talk to Wilson over the fence. And he would, kind of spill his guts to Wilson, and Wilson would give him some advice and try to help him out. And it'd be something like he'd be out there talking at 10 o'clock at night because he couldn't sleep because of something going on with his show or his family or something like that. And so he'd get done, and he'd be like, Wilson, what are you doing out here? And say, well, once a year, Tim, you have an opportunity to see the mating pattern of the green-eyed albino fruit bat. So he was out there observing it. He wasn't a biologist, okay? Nothing more than his own personal growth, and he was always doing those types of things. So he would be somebody who's like a self-actualizer. Right? Again, we all don't get up there. Most people are happy if they get to that self-esteem level where stuff that matters to them in their life. Things are going well. They got the career. They got their business. They bought a house or what have you. They're good to go. Okay. was interesting. Something that Maslow said, I remember when I first learned about this, it was probably in the 80s or something like that. He says most people who are in poverty, you know, who are like on welfare or living in like Section 8 or CMH type housing and stuff like that, he says most of them will never go beyond that. Will never go beyond that. They got the safety and security, and that's where they're gonna, you know, stop. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, if you give these people an opportunity to get out of that, you know, they, you know, could make a living and have a career and go on. And it's like, you know, I'm like, I don't know about that. All right, well then, you know, I got out of school and started working and stuff like that. Are you guys familiar with Ohio Means Jobs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you need to get assistance, maybe trying to get a job or get some training or whatever, you could go to Ohio Means Jobs. Before it was called One Stop. Before that, it came out of a program called Welfare to Work. And I think this was maybe under Bill Clinton or something like that. So as you're going back, you know, in the 90s or whatever. And the whole idea was to get people, you know, off of welfare and, you know, getting them working. Well, when they first started, you know, trying to figure this out, they did a little pilot. And they picked a housing unit. I'm thinking it was in Detroit. And it was like a, you know, Section 8 housing. And they went there and they told all the people who were living in that building that your building was chosen as you know, randomly to be in this experiment. And we're gonna give you, because you live in this building, you qualify. We're gonna pay for whatever training, excuse me, whatever you need to get on your feet and to have a career and get out of like CMHA housing, Section 8 housing, have your own income, not be dependent on food stamps and welfare and all that. Whatever you need, you know, become a CDL, a nurse, whatever, we're paying for it. You just let us know, we're gonna help you. And they may even have like a stipend while you're doing that. The whole thing, the bottom line was they wanted to see, you know, how to set up the program to get people, you know, go from welfare to work kind of thing. Do you know what everybody in that building did? They moved out into another building.
What?
They wanted no part of it. And I'm thinking, oh man, maybe Maslow was right. They were comfortable where they were, and they wanted no part of necessarily getting out of that situation. I don't know why, but like I said, when I remember reading that study, I'm like, wow, you know, it was like I said, free everything just to get you, you know, on a person's feet or whatever. So I don't know. There's a whole thing in psychology where they talk about like intrinsic, extrinsic motivation kind of stuff. Basically, it comes down to, I think, to really improve or move ahead, you gotta have some skin in the game. And I think in that situation, the people didn't have very much skin in the game and, you know, just kind of chose a different option or whatever. So, not sure. Like I said, I don't know if any sociologists or anybody in those types of areas, human services, ever did any further research on it. But like I said, I remember reading it and I thought, wow, that was, you know, I was like shocked. I didn't think that would happen. So anyway, give it some thought, and why don't you be back by, try to be back by 10:02 or so. I'll go over Carl Rogers with him and get his theory started. Then I'm going to review chapter 12 at the end. Get you started on that. What you need to know from that chapter, and then get us out of here. So get you back around 10:02 or so, and we'll pick up from there.
this theory? All right, let's talk a little about Carl Rogers. Also a humanistic psychologist, part of that third course episode. Carl Rogers developed what's called, his theory is called theory of self, S-E-L-F, self theory or theory of self. And according to Rogers, the self, or the self-concept sometimes as it's called, is your ever-changing, ever-evolving perception of who you are. Your ever-evolving, ever-changing perception of who you are. So this is everything. I mean, this is like your how you perceive your abilities, your physical characteristics, your emotions, your ever-changing, ever-evolving perception of who you are. And he says that the goal of all people are to become fully functioning. Fully functioning. It's similar to Maslow's self-actualization in a way, but what he means by fully functioning is that you get to a point where you have what he calls a gut response to life. It's like you learn to trust your gut, your intuition is what he's saying. So instead of going and talk, oh, should I break up with this person, or what should I major in, or should I quit this job? Instead of talking, you trust more or less this sort of intuition, this gut response in your decision making, right or wrong. That's what you get to. That's what he says a person is fully functioning. So when they get to that level. Now, in order to understand what level they're at, remember I said with Maslow, you have to look at what needs they have. With Rogers, he says that everybody, to understand a person, you have to understand them from their own subjective psychological world. There's another term, if you ever come across this, I don't think you use it in your book, but if you ever take another psychology class, you hear the word phenomenal field. Phenomenal field. That refers to your own subjective psychological world. And Rogers says that the person, the self or self-concept kind of emerges or comes out of that phenomenal field or your own subjective psychological world. So for me to understand Isaiah, I gotta put myself in his shoes just to see where he's coming from, so I can understand, his self-concept, like where it's coming from. Okay? Same thing Roxanne, to understand hers, I gotta put myself in her shoes. Okay? Because Isaiah and Roxanne they're completely different. They're coming out of their own subjective psychological world. They have sort of a different perception, each of them, of who they are and where they're at in terms of this process. Okay? Now, according to Rogers, in a way similar to Freud,
he believed that the self or self-concept can be divided into three parts. Self or self-concept, and it can be divided into three parts. We have what's called the self-image. You have the true self. And then you have what's called the ideal self. So the self or self-concept is broken down into these three basic parts. The self-image is the person who you think you are. The true self is the person who you really are. The ideal self is, it's like the person you're trying to become. It's like the perfect you. You don't ever get there, but you keep trying to get close. And it's like you got the perfect job, perfect relationships, perfect health, perfect everything. Where you live, it's sunny and 74 degrees every day, and it rains just enough at night for all the plants to grow and animals to live. I mean, you live in like, whatever, that's the ideal self. You don't get there, but you keep striving to get there. Now, for a person to grow and become fully functioning, develop that gut response to life, one of the things that has to happen is these three parts of the self have to match up. They have to be consistent. Right? Or the term Rogers uses is he says they have to be congruent. And congruent just means that they all have to, pretty much be consistent with one another or match up. If they're incongruent, if they're like inconsistent or mismatch each other, he says that can lead to psychological problems and maladjustment. Sure. He says, in order for a person to become fully functioning, these three parts have to be congruent. They have to sort of match, be consistent with one another. If they're incongruent, if they're mismatched, if there's inconsistencies there, the person will have psychological problems or maladjustment. Give an example. Have you guys ever heard of the condition anorexia nervosa?
Yeah.
It's an eating disorder. And somebody who has that particular disorder, no matter how much they weigh, no matter what they look like, their self-image, they always perceive themselves as being what? Fat or heavy or overweight. Okay? Now, if let's say you're a 19-year-old woman and you're 5'5", and you weigh 85 pounds, the true self, are you fat or overweight?
No.
At 5'5" and 85 pounds?
No.
No. Okay. The ideal self, I don't know what that would be, 5'5" and 40 pounds or something. Is that realistic? Will anybody get there and still stay alive? Probably not. So this person is incongruent. Okay. The self-image, they perceive themselves as being heavy or overweight. The true self is they're way underweight. Okay. And the ideal stuff, whatever they're striving to become, is just not realistic. It's never gonna happen. Okay? And so there's this incongruent, and that's where you get into these psychological problems. Okay? If you're a little kid, you can have these big gaps. All right, if you got a kid who's 7 years old, and they say, you know, they're in the backyard shooting hoops, and they say they're gonna be the next LeBron James. And you're looking at them, and it's like, okay, you know, whatever. It's a little kid, a 6, 7-year-old, who knows? Okay. Get a 62-year-old man saying the same thing. I'm gonna be the next LeBron James, and I'm going to practice and playing basketball. It's probably not gonna happen. Okay? And that's gonna be incongruent, and I'm not gonna grow as a person because it just, these different parts of the self are mismatched. Okay? The other thing too is that a person's experiences, okay, it's very important that the person's experiences are congruent with the self or self-concept. Okay? They match. There's that constant being open to experiences and allowing yourself to evolve and move forward. Okay? Those have to be congruent too. Okay? So say for example, a person's coming back to college, and let's say they're 38 years old. So they've been out of maybe school for 20 years. And they've had a job working, you know, some job at a place in a supply chain or something like that. They, you know, but they want to go back to school. And their self-image, they perceive themselves as being very intelligent. Okay? They, you know, read a lot of, you know, books from the library. They usually watch more educational type YouTube or, you know, TV, you know, History, Discovery Channel. You know, they're well read and talk a lot about different subjects and stuff like that. And people even said to them, man, you're pretty smart or whatever. So they decide they're going to go back to school. And so they, you know, want to get into science or engineering or something like that, so they go downtown to like Case Western. Now, well, the problem is with Case Western, you know, unless you get scholarships or it's pretty pricey. I forget what, like one class down there costs like $3 or $4 grand just to take one class. And so a person says, well, you know, my employer's not going to pay that much, and I don't got that kind of cash, you know. And so they decide they're going to go to Tri-C. And so they come in, they're going to sign up for spring semester, or fall semester, let's say, and they come in the summer. They start signing up for classes, and, you know, I'll take this, you know, advanced calculus, differential equations, I'll take this neuroimaging of anatomy and physiology, I'm going to take this honors English. Well, as they try to register, they're told, well, you can't do that, you got to do these prerequisites, and in fact, you got to take the placement exam before you do anything. And they're like, okay, no big deal. So you take the placement exam, and they end up in like remedial math or English. And they're completely taken back. It's like, no, I can't, you know, I'm much smarter than that. And they let them take it again, and they end up in the same spot. So for the fall semester, let's say they maybe take a couple classes, like the English, I don't know what the numbers are now, 195, math 195, and maybe the freshman orientation or college orientation class. Well, they got a B or an A in that. They pass the English, and they get a U in the math, so they have to take it again. And so they, you know, come back in the spring. It's like, I can't believe I gotta take this math again. You know, first time I took it was horrible. The teacher was from another country. I couldn't understand them. There's all these mistakes. The class was blah, 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 you know, on and on. So they sent up for that, the English 10-10, maybe a psychology or something like that. Math isn't going the way they wanted to go. They ended up with a C on their first psychology test, you couldn't believe it. And so on. And eventually gets to a point where they just drop out. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna go to a Case Western, you know, a school where I belong, you know, Tri-C's geared more toward, you know, whatever kids coming out of high school, and you know, making all stuff, okay? What Rogers would say is that this person is not open to these experiences, and they're not gonna grow. Now, our person here, even though they're having, some struggles in school, is it possible that they are a very intelligent person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but they've been out of school for 20 years. School isn't an IQ test. It's, it's got its own culture to it or whatever. It'd be like if you were in high school, a star athlete, let's say you're a cross-country runner, and you graduated and you haven't gone on a run in 20 years. All right, your first time out, you might jog or run a quarter mile and be, laying on the ground, panting and stuff like that, getting used to it. Same thing here, when you go back to college, you don't do algebra every day. You gotta get used to that stuff again. You gotta, think differently and all that. So it's like, and I knew a guy like that. He had a learning disability, and I think he went back to college when he was in his 30s. And because he couldn't afford it, and he was working as a carpenter and stuff like that. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, his father passed away and left his mother some money. And the mom said, "Look, you go to college, I'll pay for it and help you out." So this guy, he started like at the very bottom math, and he was going to be an engineering major. And that guy would figured out his work schedule or whatever. And the days he'd come in and he'd be there all day, getting tutoring, working on his math in the tutoring center. He'd bring a couple peanut butter sandwiches and just spend the whole day there. And the guy started progressing up through the maths, got through all the calculus, all the differential equations, the physics, got into the engineering program. And and that's a case where this is what this person needs to do. They need to get back in a group, but they're not open to those experiences, so they're not going to grow. Okay, they're not going to become fully functioning, according to Rogers. Okay. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how the self develops. Rogers was one of these people. There's other psychologists, Piaget, some other ones. He believed that when people are born, they believe they're intertwined with the rest of the universe. They're one with the rest of the continuous. Then what happens, somewhere around, we'll say 18 months of age, the person realizes that they're separate from the rest of the universe. They develop what he calls the objective self, the objective self. Right? How do you know this happens? Well, there were researchers, Lewis and others, they did this study where they took little babies, like 12 months of age, year and a half, 2 years of age, and so on. And they did a study where they put these babies in front of a mirror. And I don't know if anybody's ever had any little babies or brothers and sisters. Well, they get in front of a mirror, they always start touching the reflection and playing with the reflection and stuff. So that's what they did. Then what the researchers did is they went over and pretended to wipe the baby's nose, and they put some makeup on their nose while they did it, like some rouge. Okay, so they put that on the nose. The babies who were less than 18 months of age, when they saw that in the reflection in the mirror, reached out and touched the nose in the reflection. The ones who were 18 months of age, when they saw it, they went and they touched their own nose.
Interesting.
So they realized that that was them. Okay. that they're separate, and that they developed an objective self, okay? Later on, children then develop what's called the subjective self. The subjective self, usually between like ages 2 and 3, where they realize that they're not only separate, but they're an agent of change. They can make things happen. All right, so picture in your head like a 2.5-year-old sitting in a high chair with a tray in front of them, with like a sippy cup on that tray, and they knock it on the floor. You're in the kitchen. You go over, you pick it up, you put it back on the tray. Well, that's kind of cool. You do it again. So you walk over, pick it up, put it on the tray. Little 2.5-year-old or so is like, it's a fun game. They knock it on the floor again. You pick it up again. You tell them you do it again. I'm going to put the sippy cup on the counter. Yeah, whatever. They knock it on the floor again. All right, the parent, whoever picks up, all right, that's it. Put it on the counter. You don't want it. Then they start, crying and screaming and pointing at it and stuff like that. All right, that's the subjective self. They start to realize that they're an object. They can make stuff happen. They can do things. Okay? They're not just separate, but they have this ability to be an agent of change to make stuff happen. When they get to that level, okay, just what I described happens here, is then they're going to start to get evaluated. They get evaluated. Some of the stuff they do gets positive evaluations. Some of the stuff they do is going to get negative evaluations. These evaluations are going to come from their parents, their siblings, friends, students, teachers, everybody in their life. Parents, siblings, friends, other students, teachers. They're going to be evaluated on different things they do. Like I said, sometimes they're going to get positives, sometimes they're going to get negatives. And what develops from this is what Rogers calls conditions of worth. Conditions of worth. And conditions of worth are internal standards that are created by these evaluations. And in order to be loved or accepted, we have to live up to these standards. What really creates these types of internal standards, where it makes us feel this way, that we're only a good, worthwhile, lovable person if we do, A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, are something that he refers to as conditional positive regard. Conditional positive regard. Rogers says that what really kind of contributes to this feeling of having to, be worthwhile or lovable, living up to these standards, is something called a conditional positive regard. Okay. Conditional positive regards means that you will be loved and so forth, but there's strings attached. There's like a contingency. You will be loved only if you do this. And you're not kind of accepted for who you are. All right, like Roger says, instead of conditional positive regard, all right, what like parents and people should do for children is provide unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard, what that means is you accept the person as who they are. So picture this, it's a nice day outside. Let's say my son is in 8th grade. And I want him to eventually go to high school and be like the starting quarterback on the football team. Right? He's got like 0 interest in athletics. Totally into flowers and flower arranging. He's good at it too, let's say. So I get home from teaching you guys, beautiful day. I immediately go in the garage, grab the football, go and get him and say, hey, let's go out in the yard and throw the old rock around. And there he is on his phone or computer looking at different fall arrangements or something like that. And I'm like, oh, let your sister and mother play with the flowers. Let's go outside and throw the rock around. So the kid, goes outside and, throws a pass or whatever, and I say, that's my boy. That's who I is my son. That's some kid playing with flowers. Okay. What Rogers is saying, I'm using conditional positive regard. Okay. This kid only is going to feel like loved if they're, a football player or something like that. And they have no interest in it. Okay, what he's saying is I should be accepting. If the kid's in the flowers, he's in the flowers. Okay? Support that. Because that'll allow a person to kind of grow. All right? So he looks at those 2 different things. Conditional positive regard, it's like, I'll love you. Okay? I'll love you as students as long as you're getting good grades. Okay, there's strings attached. Okay. Unconditional positive regard means that you accept the person who they are and they're loved regardless. Okay, and it limits the development of those conditions of worth. Okay. See, what Roger says is that you don't want to have these conditions of worth. Okay, he says what you need to develop is something called organismic valuing. Organismic valuing. Organismic valuing is where you trust yourself to make decisions. You trust yourself to make decisions. So if you start to trust yourself to make decisions, that helps you develop that gut response to life and allows you to become that fully functioning person. All right? I'll give you some examples next week from high school and college that kind of spell this out, this conditional, unconditional, positive regard. But for now, I want to just, from chapter 12, I want you guys, these are the things I want you to focus on. before I let you go here, so let me go over these. Chapter 12, know the definition of social psychology. Know the definition of social psychology. The second one I want you to know out of there is be familiar with what's called the just world hypothesis. The just world hypothesis. The just world hypothesis, this was something formulated by a guy named Lerner. Just really, I think, one major study in this, but it was pretty significant. Just world hypothesis. Have you guys ever heard of the term like good karma or bad karma? You do something good and then something good comes back to you, or if you do something bad, you get bad karma, something bad happens to you. It's kind of like the same idea, the just world hypothesis. Basically, people got what's, what's coming to them, they got what's coming to them. Okay, he did this one study. I can't remember exactly, but he had like two scenarios. He asked people, he said, all right, you got this guy, he calls his wife, says he's working late, but he's lying. He's gonna go out with his girlfriend and go out drinking and stuff. On his way home, he crashes his car into a tree. Then the other scenario was this guy calls his wife, says he's gonna be late because he's gonna take flowers to his mother who's in a nursing home because it's her birthday. So he picks up the flowers, goes to the nursing home, and on his way home, he crashes his car into a tree. And Lerner then asked the people, it's like, well, which one deserved it more? The first guy who lied to his wife, or the second guy who went to visit his mom in a nursing home? Well, majority of the people said the first guy, because he lied to his wife, so he had it, coming. But there was a small percentage of people said the second guy, the guy who was taking flowers to his mom in a nursing home. And when he followed up with these people and said, why'd you come up with that conclusion? They said, because you know what? He might have been doing something good there, but there was something he must have done along the way, and so he had it coming. Maybe he did something bad at work or somewhere, or screwed somebody else over, so he had it coming. Okay. So take a look at that just world hypothesis. Know the three parts of an attitude. Know the three parts of an attitude. So know the definition of social psychology, just world hypothesis, three parts of an attitude. And then the other one I want you to read about is Stanley Milgram, M-I-L-G-R-A-M, Stanley Milgram, his study on obedience. His study on obedience. It was done in the 50s, okay? And where it came from is that they had these Nuremberg trials going on from people who were in these, in the Nazi concentration camps and stuff like that. And Klaus Barbie was one of them, and there were these Nazi guards. And so when they were on trial for war crimes, and they found out that they killed whatever thousands of people at a time, sticking them in, burning them alive, and torturing them, all this other stuff. They asked, how can you do that to all these people and children and stuff? And their answer was, well, we were just following orders. Well, Milgram wanted to find out, how can you make people not follow orders to do that kind of specific stuff, like murder children and stuff like that. So he did this experiment where he put an article in the local paper in Newport, Connecticut, and he said he's doing an experiment on learning and memory. And if you come and participate, you'll get like 20 or 50 bucks, which is a lot, you know, back in the 1950s. So you got people signed up and they would come in, and there would be Milgram, one of his assistants who was described as a subject, or disguised as a subject, and a real subject. And they would flip a coin who was gonna be the teacher and who was gonna be the learner, and it was rigged so that the real subject was always gonna be the teacher. And so what the teacher was supposed to do is read to the learner a list of words, and the learner was supposed to try to remember them and say them back correctly. Okay? Simple. You know, if I gave you 4 words and asked you to repeat them back to me, that's all it was. The learner was put in one, or the teacher was put in one room, and the learner was put in another room. And the teacher saw that the learner was sat down and her hands were strapped to an electric plate to give them an electric shock. And so the teacher was brought in this other room, and he had like a microphone, there's a speaker, and he would read the list of words, and if the person made a mistake, he would have to give them a shock. And across the board, it started at 15 volts, and it went all the way up to 450 volts. And so Milgram went to psychiatrists before the experiment. So what do you think? How many people do you think would go all the way up to 450? They said probably nobody. You know, maybe less than like 0.5% or something. Well, I forgot how many people we ended up. I think it was like over 50% went over to 450 volts. And so the experiment starts. It's going okay. Then the person makes a mistake, and the person gives them a shock. And then, you know, it's going on, the person makes another mistake, so he gives them another shock, 30 volts, 45. Then it gets up to like, you know, over 100 volts. And the person says, I don't want to do this anymore. I have a heart condition. I can't be getting these shocks. Now, there's nobody there, it's a recording. Okay? So it's just a recording. And so the person's giving these shocks, and Milgram's standing there with a lab coat on. And the subject is, you know, kind of getting stressed out or anxious because they want to, you know, continue in the experiment, but they're hurting this other person. And, you know, they stopped. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? The guy on the other side said there. All right. Now, here's the thing I want you to do is read that over. Okay. And I want you to look and see, what did Milgram tell them? When they protested, when they didn't want to continue the experiment, what was the one thing that Milgram told them that kept them going? Okay. It was pretty simple, but they kept on doing it. They giving this other person a shot. Like I said, and it got to a point where it was over like 150. The person on the other side was like dead silent. They weren't saying anything anymore. And if you read the list of words and nobody responded, that was a shock. Then you read the next list, they don't respond, shock. And the person keeps going and going and going and going. And, you know, so, again, they would look at Milgram. Milgram would just say one thing to them, and they would just kind of keep going. So, like I said, it's an interesting study on the whole idea of obedience. So take a look at that. So that's it for chapter 12 next week. Wrap up chapter 11, get into 14. We'll get to 15, but at the end of class, I'll review for your exam, which will be in 2 weeks. And then you're off for Thanksgiving. And then we got one meeting in December on the first Saturday. Then the final will be the second Saturday. Then it'll be Christmas, and it'll be summer. And so then we'll go from there. So have a good rest of your week. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.